Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, we've covered the Gene Hackman and the Betsy Arakawa case quite extensively, and we've covered the science of it, and we've covered somewhat the police angle of it. But tonight we're going to cover more of the police angle of it. And I think as the coverage becomes clearer and the science comes back to this case, I think most people, when presented with the facts and the circumstances as we know them, will probably agree, minus some horrific finding in the toxicology. Most people will agree that this case looks like a horrible set of circumstances resulting from natural deaths. And as rare as it is for two people to die at the same time, we don't specifically know if they died at the same time. The time frame we're dealing with is really based upon when Mr. Hackman's pacemaker stopped. And that happened on the 17th of February. So using that, it's, about a 10-day, or it could even be longer than that he passed away. So we want to look at what were the actions of the police and what made them think that this was suspicious. Was it the high profile nature of this case, or did they see other things? Anyway, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your seats, hold on to your loved ones. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds and everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Folks, we have a new sponsor here, and it's called Mando Whole Body Deodorant. And the thing that I like most about Mando Body Deodorant is that it lasts all day and leaves me feeling clean and fresh. Most deodorants stop working after a certain amount of time or under the hot and steamy conditions. Mando fights the conditions and the odor from perspiration. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code POLICE, POLICE, in capital letters at shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. And that guy in the thumbnail is neither myself or Phil Grimaldi. Anyway, joining me tonight on the show, he hasn't been here in a few weeks, but he's here tonight. Retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, New York. Welcome to the show, retired detective Phil Grimaldi from the NYPD. Phil, welcome.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me.
You know, Phil, we've done extensive work on this case, and there's been a lot of coverage. Of course, it's a high-profile case because Mr. Hackman, Gene Hackman, twice Academy Award-winning actor, and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. And it presented itself enough so that the police felt that this was suspicious. But yet, as they take their time and break it down and look at the evidence, it sort of presents itself perhaps in a different way. And many people look, I listen, I watch, I read, and I watch the chat on our show. And there's still many people that find this case highly, highly suspicious. That the one big thing, and Joseph Scott Morgan, who's a really respected death investigator, he said the number one thing that bothered him the most was that the front door was left open. And I think that can be explainable. But Phil, I'm interested to hearing your opinion from a police perspective, your thoughts on this case.
Well, Billy, right off the bat, there's a couple of things that I think came to the surface quickly and started a lot of the conspiracy theories, and they kind of fueled them, and it raised the level of suspicion in the public. I think the law enforcement officers, the Santa Fe Police Department, or Santa Fe Sheriff's Department, labeling it as possibly suspicious was probably the right way to label it. But if you look at the posture of the Santa Fe Police Department, I don't think there's a great urgency with regard to let's go out and try and put a murderer behind bars in this case. This case, I think one of the things that mainly jumped out, you just talked about it, the unlocked door, but they're living in a private community that's very, very secluded. So having a door unlocked, let's say during the day, I don't think would be such an unusual thing. No signs of forced entry, as we know. They've ruled out carbon monoxide. They've ruled out no blunt force trauma to the victims in this case. And I talked about this with you previously, Bill. When you walk into a scene, whether it be a investigate DOA or a crime scene, you're going to read the scene. And what I mean by that is there's going to be specific things that you're going to observe within that scene. A knocked over lamp, let's say, or a knocked over a chair, and then the person's lying next to it. You're going to look to see if there's bruising. Perhaps the person fell and hit their head. So some of the things that you observe when you first walk into that scene, along with information that you gather, can be submitted to the medical examiner before autopsy. And then once they do the autopsy, they can come to a conclusion what they believe happened even before toxicology comes back or any kind of testing. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. One of the things I thought was a little bit unusual, there were no cameras in the home. Now we live in 2025. There are cameras everywhere. There doesn't seem to have been any type of Ring doorbell camera or a security camera. However, that doesn't mean there aren't other cameras in the areas leading to the Hackman location, the Hackman home. So I'm sure that the investigators will be doing follow-ups. And some of the things that have been reported already, I mean, that pacemaker, that's going to be very, very important to this investigation. Was there some type of a cardiac event? My understanding is that some of the latest models of pacemakers, they connect to Wi-Fi and they will send messages from the pacemaker to whatever, the home base of whoever has that pacemaker would report it, let's say on a laptop, a computer, a cell phone. So if there's some type of a cardiac event, and we know that the pacemaker stopped working, I believe on the 17th. So there's a lot here. And based on everything that I saw, and I think you said it last night, I know Barbara Butcher kind of felt that way. This does not look like any type of criminality to me at this point.
Absolutely. This is an aerial view of the Hackman home. I'm going to read right from the search warrant. When Deputy Thomas and Barron arrived, Deputy Thomas indicated he spoke to two individuals, one of which was the reporting party, who found and located the front door of the residence. There's the address in there, to be opened and ajar. Deputy Thomas identified the reporting party by a male named and the name they redacted from the warrant, who was advised he works as a maintenance worker for a company called Home Company. The other maintenance worker was identified, and they also redacted his name. Deputy Thomas told the affiant, after speaking to two males, he and Deputy Barron then walked to the front of the residence and found the front door ajar. So there it is, right out of the warrant. The door was open. There was a lot of discrepancy, people saying, oh, how do they know that it's right in the search warrant? He advised he did not observe any signs of forced entry in the home. There was another big thing that we mentioned. After Deputy Thomas entered the residence, he immediately observed the bathroom to the left of the front door. The door to the bathroom was opened. Deputy Thomas advised he observed a deceased female laying on the ground near the countertop inside the bathroom. The female was observed laying on her right side. He advised she was found wearing dark gray sweatpants and a light in color sweatshirt. The female was observed to have black in color hair. Deputy Thomas advised he observed a black in color space heater near the female's head. He advised he suspected the heater could have fallen in the event the female abruptly fell to the ground. He advised he also observed an orange prescription bottle on the countertop near the deceased female. The prescription bottle appeared open with pills scattered on the countertop. Deputy Thomas advised the female decedent showed obvious signs of death, body decomposition, bloating in her face, and mummification in both hands and feet. Affiant learned Deputy Thomas and Baron continued to search the residence, where they then observed and found the deceased brown in color German Shepherd canine. The deceased canine was located approximately 10 to 15 feet from the deceased female in the closet of the bathroom. Deputy Thomas and Baron then proceeded to clear the other portions of the residence. In doing so, they observed a pair of feet and legs on the ground near the kitchen area. Deputy Thomas identified a male to be deceased in an area of the home he believed to be a mudroom. The deceased male, who was found wearing gray sweatpants, a blue in color long sweat t-shirt, brown slippers, and a walking cane. Deputy Thomas indicated he observed a pair of sunglasses located near the decedent's left of his body. Based on Deputy Thomas's training and experience, he suspected the male individual had suddenly fallen. So that is what they were presented with in the house. So no signs of forced entry, no signs of blunt trauma to either body, no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, no bruising. So right away, the police response, they treat it with the utmost respect to the scene, and they handle it as a crime scene. As we mentioned in the book Practical Homicide Investigation by Vernon Gebeth, a retired lieutenant squad commander from the NYPD, he says in his book, and quoting, always treat a death investigation as if it's a homicide until facts and circumstances dictate otherwise. And that's what these two investigators, that's what these two detectives did. And that was the correct course of action. It just arriving on the scene, just showed up for the show, retired FBI agent and frequent talking head on all the channels. You guys have seen him all over the place. Welcome to the show, retired FBI agent Bobby Chacon. Bobby, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you again.
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Hi, Phil. How are you?
Good.
You know, Bobby, we're discussing, and we did a lot of work on this case. This is probably the fourth or fifth show we've done. I had Barbara Butcher on last night, medical legal investigator. And not that we want to jump the gun ahead of the toxicological report, which is not back yet. Or, in fact, even the official autopsy report is not back yet.
Right.
What we have are people making predictions. And I mean, as I've been wrong before, and I will always say that I've been wrong before, but as far as I'm concerned, this to me looks like two natural deaths and an accidental death of the dog that was unfortunately locked in an area he couldn't get out, and they believe the dog died of dehydration. Your thoughts, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I said that day one, that the dog probably died of dehydration, that it was probably, although you have to keep it open, and like you said, you have to always investigate it as a homicide and as a crime scene, because you don't get a second chance. If you don't treat it as a crime scene, you don't have a chance to go back and say, oh, wait, now we're going to treat it as a crime scene after everybody trampled through it again. You only have that one chance to keep the scene, sterile and to do your crime scene investigation before everybody kind of gets in there. And so that's always a prudent thing to do, as you mentioned, as you quoted from the book. That's always a prudent thing to do, because it doesn't hurt you to do it as a crime scene, even if it ultimately ends up as not being a crime. But it does hurt you if you do the opposite, if you don't treat it as a crime scene and later on it turns into a crime. So really, it's always prudent to kind of treat almost every scene like that as a possible homicide or a possible crime, and get your crime scene team in there, which they did. They worked all through the night. They did a lot of work. And I think, now that, we've had a chance to look at this from a few different angles, I mean, I agree with you. As exceedingly rare as it is to have two natural deaths in the same house about the same time, and that is extremely rare. I think you have it in this case. I think there's a tendency of the public now, because of true crime is everything, to jump to, oh my God, it's this, it's that. And sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. And in this case, that's what I think. I will say this. I think his death is not connected to her death, but her death is connected to his death, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes tons of sense.
Exactly. It does. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he was going to die anyway that day. That was his day to go. I think her death, although natural and maybe accidental, maybe whatever, not a crime, her death was instigated or by his death, or not instigated might be the wrong word, but was
A result of.
Precipitated. That's a good word.
in some way, it was like she wasn't going to die that day if he didn't die. He was going to die. That was his natural time to go, in my opinion. And they may find different. Like, I'm with you, Bill. I always reserve the right to be wrong. But I think that her death is and that's the story here. I think that's what they have to try to figure out, like why she died. Did she rush in there to get her pills? Was she trying to prevent him from falling? Was she struggling to try to get him up and then overexerted herself? And then she was trying to get her own pills and got the wrong pills and spilled them in her attempt to kind of, was she having her own cardiac, event, or was she trying to get his pills and slipped and fell? That's more unlikely, because they would have seen that injury pattern. But I think her death is somehow the result of his death. And that's the interesting thing here to me is, a 95-year-old man on the ground next to his cane, that's a common scene. But having
many times,
right? I mean, right? It's happens all the time. And but a 63-year-old woman, 15 feet away or 20 feet, however far away she was, his wife of a long time, being dead at the same time. That's the unusual part of this case, and I think that's the story to figure out. Figuring out his death is kind of easy, I think.
Absolutely. Someone from the chat named Vamplifire, stress cardiomyopathy. Very possible. Very, very possible. And thank you. I noticed that you've made several comments and I didn't call on you. So it's like the student in the class. I just called you. Thank you so much for your comments. One of the things, though, Bobby, and one of the reasons I wanted to do another show from the police perspective and from the police investigation, because there's so much crap online, even from TV stations. This is a murder. This is there are no indications from anyone who is a professional homicide investigator anywhere on this earth that's saying this is a murder. There's several things, several doors that we have to shut, several boxes we have to check, but no one's seeing that's a serious investigator. No one is seeing this right now as a homicide investigation. It's what we call on the NYPD as a CUPI, circumstances undetermined pending police investigation. And Phil, you know about that well. Your comments, Phil.
Yeah, actually, we called it a cause unknown pending police investigation, CUPI. When the medical examiner couldn't find an exact cause of death, they would throw it back to the detectives to do further investigation to try and come up with circumstances, like you just said, Billy, that may put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But I just want to piggyback something that Bobby just said. A routine DOA, we would go out on those. Anytime a person dies in the squad, we would go out. And like you said, Bobby, you only get that one shot. So a 95-year-old cancer patient passes away. You get to the scene. We would still do what we would call a quick examination of the body, and we would take pictures. just in the event that perhaps down the line, the body goes to the morgue and they find bullet holes in the back of the person or stab wounds, we at least have some pictures. And we would interview the people at the president's, such like that. But I think when you have someone of superstar status like Gene Hackman, he passes away. Now, if he died in his sleep and his wife found him, called 911 or whatever it was, this still would have been a major, major news event because he's Gene Hackman, several times winning Academy Awards, 77 films to his credit, a tremendous actor. And near and dear to my heart is the movie The French Connection, was filmed in my neighborhood when I was just a kid. There you got the picture from that. I mean,
my favorite movie of all time.
That is really, really the movie that sparked my interest, and it inspired me to become a police officer.
That's my dad's generation. My dad knew Eddie Egan. He knew Randy Jurgensen. He knew those guys. My dad was a cop with those guys. And so when that movie came out, I mean, the scene of them two with the diner cups of coffee in a really rainy, surveillance car, and you can feel the dampness in the car's carpet just from like if you've been in that situation, sitting there in a cold New York day, with a cup of coffee in that diner cup, and the car's wet inside because you got in and you were wet, and you're sitting there for hours waiting for the guy to come out. I mean,
the foot surveillance, Bobby, when they're doing the foot surveillance in Midtown Manhattan, you're talking about he's in the doorway, he's freezing, and they bring him a cup of coffee and a slice of pizza. And I mean, there was no radios like there is today.
When I saw that scene, the cup of the coffee and the pizza, I was like, that is cop food. That is
it really exemplified,
eat, right?
Yeah, it really exemplified what an NYPD detective. That's before my time. That's the generation before me. But I had an uncle that was a police officer in the 60s. Came out of the army, went into the NYPD. He wound up getting hurt in the Brooklyn College riots during the Vietnam era in '69. But his influence on me, and then that movie, I snuck into the movie theater to see that after my older brother and his friends had seen it. They were talking about it. They had filmed it in my neighborhood. We seen some of the car scene, the car chase scenes. So it really, really exemplified like a true grit, old school narcotics detective. And Eddie Egan was in the film, and that's what the movie is about. He really had a lot to do with the technical advising, him and Sonny Grasso, who I met a few times. Yeah. So the point being, if Gene Hackman dies, it's big news. But now once they introduced, the door is left open, which you just said in the search warrant, they said his body was found with sunglasses next to him. So perhaps it was the daytime. Like I said earlier, it's a private community, gated. They had the door open. Not really that much of a big red flag for me. And then once they said in the media, this mummification, I mean, Barbara Butcher explained it. It only has to do with the climate in New Mexico being very, very dry, low humidity, and the skin just dried out. Once they threw that word in there, that kind of threw everything up in the air and started all the conspiracy theories. And then the bottle of pills on the floor, maybe they were thinking murder, suicide. But once we knew that there was really no signs of the house wasn't rummaged through, there were no signs of forced entry, no trauma to either of the bodies, that's when everything started for me, started to go in the direction of a natural death. Unfortunately, and very unusually, that two people die at the same time. And I think Bobby kind of explained it right there. He checked out his heart. He had a heart condition for many years, and perhaps her, in her haste to try and help him, maybe she had an undiagnosed condition, or maybe she was diagnosed with some type of high blood pressure or a cardiac event. And I think that she succumbed to whatever it was, the excitement of that day.
Let's hear what Michael Baden has to say.
Television appearance saying, quote, there was no carbon monoxide, and he had the most common cause of death in this country, severe heart disease. So that would cause him, having cardiac arrest in the mudroom, to collapse right there. Interesting theory from Dr. Baden, being able to trace back the date on the pacemaker as well. Gene Hackman might have been dead for 9 days, according to what his pacemaker showed. So what else are investigators going to dig into? Maybe the cell phones, perhaps?
Boom. That, Bobby, and as we know, we are children of the 21st century. A cell phone comes into play in almost every single investigation that you're involved in. And right now, they have the cell phones, but they haven't been able to get into them yet.
Yeah.
We said last night, well, maybe they need the help of the FBI. Because remember when that they had the cell phones of that, I think it was a terrorist organization.
San Bernardino terrorists
Yes,
out
and,
here.
and,
It
and
was an
Apple
iPhone,
wouldn't help them.
us. In fact, don't ask the FBI because we couldn't do it either. We actually hired a hacker, I think, from Israel. There was like a company that they're kind of hacker kids, but they rent themselves out. We actually hired somebody to hack into that phone. We couldn't even do it ourselves. So yeah, privacy is what these companies are always kind of touting when they're selling some of their products. And so it's like they keep coming up with harder and harder ways for us to get into phones. I mean, I got an new iPhone recently, and now I realize now you can actually, and I did, it's my brother, you can actually appoint someone who, if you die and your phone is frozen, like almost like a next of kin for your phone, they'll give that person the ability to get into your phone, and they'll give them your password or whatever. I don't know how they do it, but you can actually designate somebody now.
That's interesting.
In the event of your death, Apple knows that person, you've designated them, and you have to provide some kind of documentation. But I've done that, and that person gets your phone, and Apple gives them the ability to get into that phone.
Bobby,
That's a good
even the
thing.
whole concept of burner phones, someone that is using the airwaves, the Federal Communication Commission and the public owns the airwaves, but the FCC runs the airwaves. So you would think they could legislate that, oh no, you can't do that. You can't make burner phones. We have to know who you sold the phone to. Because
my old boss, Jim Kallstrom, he was our assistant director in New York for many years. And he worked actually with Senator D'Amato Senator Gore, Al Gore, when he was senator. They worked on something called the digital telephony bill when phones were first going digital. And there was a law that forced the companies to build in back doors into their systems so that they could always get in, or we could always subpoena them and get a court order to get in. But that has since expired, and the companies have gotten much more sophisticated with their security procedures and protocols. But I feel that once they get those phone records, and hopefully they will, that you won't see any activity on his phone after February 17th. That you're going to see everything. He may be texting regularly with somebody, old pals or whatever, or family members or whatever, but I don't think you'll see any activity on either of their phones after that 17th date, because I think that's the date of death because of the activity on his pacemaker. So that will be a helpful kind of clue when you see, okay, the 17th is when the pacemaker had that event, so-called event, and then all of a sudden, no calls, no texts, no internet queries after the 17th. It all goes blank after the 17th of February. That's my guess. And that'll be a big clue. That'll be a big part of this investigation. If both their phones kind of have no activity, no text, no email checks, no internet searches after the 17th of February, I think then with the pacemaker information, I think then you're going to have almost a confirmed cause of death. The problem with this case is, and I said it the other day on another show, it's like the guy says something about, why don't we know exactly what happened? I said, we may never know exactly what happened. Right. This may be an anecdotal conclusion. In other words, we've ruled this out, we've ruled this out, we've ruled that out, and what's left? And so it may not be very pleasant for the public to digest, but that may be the kind of case this becomes. It's just, there is no, smoking gun, if you will. There is no definitive way that you can prove the theories, but you can disprove a lot of other theories. And the more you can disprove, leaves only a few left that it could be. And I think that that's going to be the case. Unfortunately, that does leave the door open to the conspiracy theorists and the people that say it was this, it was that, because I don't think you'll ever really have a definitive conclusion. You'll have circumstantial evidence, stuff like that, but I don't think you're going to have like that one piece that shows everybody convincingly what happened.
Bobby, I think Joseph Scott Morgan.
Sure.
He's a great death investigator.
Yeah,
and a professor. Yeah. But he said what really disturbed him, and I was a little bit like this. He said, was that the door was open. And yeah, that's one piece of evidence. But If the door was open and there was trauma to the bodies, yeah, then I would be. Or if the door was open and there was another sign of ransacking the house. But minus those other details, that doesn't mean anything to me because this is a Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? They live in a house that's on 6 acres.
Very secluded.
The house itself is in a gated community.
Right.
But the house itself is up a very, very long driveway. And I think you saw the picture when you saw the police cars. It's up this very long sloping driveway. You can't actually see the house from the street where that driveway starts. And so I live in the desert like that's a desert environment. I live in the desert here. I have 2 dogs. My door, not my front door per se, but I don't live on acreage. You know, I have a regular plot. But if I lived on acreage,
you didn't make big money for the FBI.
But you know, I leave the back doors open. If I had acreage and stuff, the front door would be open too. Let some air in. You know, that's what you do. You're on like a ranch estate almost, and so the front door being open probably was a common occurrence. Now they could also talk to the landscapers, the gardeners, the people that maintain the house. And see, hey, when you were there, was the front door ever open? They'd be, yeah, they always let the front door open. We never saw them, but the door was open. They had dogs. I know they had a dog door that the dogs would let themselves in and out of. But, they had 3 dogs at least. I have 2, and they're very different. And so maybe one of them didn't like to use the dog door. Maybe they were scared. I have one that I can tell you right now would never use a dog door. He's just that kind of dog. And so maybe they left the front door open for that other dog to come and go. That didn't like the dog door. There's a lot of explanations on why that door would be open. That doesn't mean, a nefarious reason.
Right. But again, I so respect Joseph Scott Morgan.
Oh, yeah, Joe and I we had beers in Hollywood last year. We were both on the Dr. Phil show together. We stayed at the same hotel in LA, and but we have difference of opinion. But he will admit, like, it's just a concern of his. It's not like he says it must be a murder because the door was open.
Right.
You leave those things open, and that's what I mean. This case is going to be one of those ones where, people have one opinion, people have another, but I don't know that how we're ever going to get to a definitive. This is what happened.
Bobby, you led right into it. You'll interview family members, friends, or like you said, people that come and do maintenance in the area. Has the door been left open during the day before? It appears that, like I said, the sunglasses are there. This is the daytime gated community. I was just in my in-laws gated community not long ago. I ran outside to get in my car. I forgot something. I left my car running, and I didn't even think twice about it because it's a 55 and older gated community. There's nobody walking around there. So in a situation like that, now that's just a regular 55 and older community. You have this community that it's, like you said, you don't even see the house from the road. It's 10 acres or whatever it is.
6 acres, I think,
it's very, very secluded. I think it would be a common occurrence almost, maybe during the day, leave the door open. Like, it could be a simpler thing, like you said, Bob, that the dog goes out in and out through that door. So
like I said, I live in the desert, and when it's hot, and it's always hot here. I live in a gated community, and when I go to get my mail out my front door, I leave the door open. I go to get the mail because we get the mail at a central thing. It's about 4 houses down. I leave my door open. My dogs kind of wander out and watch me where I'm going. It's not, I don't live in a gated community like that. I live in a more middle-class gated community, if you will. But we're on a golf course, and it's you're in a very dry and hot climate. You live a little differently that way, and like you said, it's up a secluded driveway. I don't see that as
that wasn't a major red flag for me at all. Knowing the background of the layout of the house.
This is someone from the chat. Design Rhythm. Wealthy people with a 10,000 square foot house have cleaners, maintenance, etc., coming and going all the time. How did no one else see them for 9 days? You're assuming that. I'm sure they had help. But the guy who actually called the police, he would see them. He said every 2 weeks he would see them. So he was
an exterminator, I believe. So that's exactly what she just said is exactly how they were discovered. Someone went there, and maybe other people were there and just, knocked on the door, didn't get a response. And, they says, oh, I'm not working today. They're not home or something, So you don't know all the comings and goings, but a very good point that Bobby made. The 17th appears to be the day. So I'm sure that they can get, if it's a gated community, there's going to be a camera on that gate. So they could go back to the 17th. That's not only 7 or 8 days, 9 days from the time that the bodies were found. They can go back, look at cameras to see who was coming and going. Did someone access the gate without the proper way to get in there, key or a code or whatever it is. So they're probably going to do all of those things. There's nothing really jumping out here that's so nefarious to me. I think we basically, as investigators, have answered some of the questions that most people would have when you're presented with things like the open door and the dog dies and inside the house and the other dogs were able to get outside. So I think that these are things, and you made a really good point, Bobby, and I've had that with a case where a person overdosed and the family just didn't want to believe it. We eliminated all the things that we thought were impossible that they didn't happen. Let's say there was no trauma to the body, all the different things that you talked about. And the only thing was, of course, we didn't have the toxicology back at the time, was we believed it was an overdose. And unfortunately, when the toxicology did come back, the family didn't want to believe it. They thought there was something suspicious, but as it turned out, it was an overdose. And I think that that's going to be very important to the whole investigation as well. Toxicology is going to show what was going on in the bodies at the time of death. So I guess we'll get a better idea and an understanding. And like you said, Bob, you may never have a 100% exact definitive answer to how they both died and the exact time and all of that, but we're going to be able to eliminate. We'll be able to eliminate no trauma to the bodies. No, it's not a homicide. It's not a suicide.
Let me play this from CBS News, just a short clip.
To indicate foul play. Santa Fe Sheriff Adon Mendoza said,
both individuals tested negative for carbon monoxide. An initial interrogation was conducted of Mr. Hackman's pacemaker. This revealed that his last event was recorded on February 17th.
Investigators believe Hackman likely died at least 9 days before the bodies were found. The home had no surveillance cameras. They say the best hope now for unraveling the mystery surrounding the death of a Hollywood legend could be the discovery of 2 cell phones collected as evidence.
Have investigators been able to get into the obtained cell phones?
Not at this time. We have them in our possession. We'll be analyzing cell phone data, phone calls, text messages, events, photos in the cell phone to try to piece a timeline together.
And we may not get answers anytime soon. Full results of the autopsies of Gene Hackman and his wife may not be released for at least 3 months, Jerry.
So, people are dying to hear the legitimate answer as to what, from the autopsy, from the toxicology. But, the government doesn't have to release that because the press is chomping at the bit, Yeah,
I mean, that we have such a... I don't know what you'd call it, but such a mentality now that we have to know everything right away, and it leads people to make crazy conclusions. For example, like, I think in the first officer's report, the uniformed officer's, report, he said something about the dog being in the closet, then later it was, the dog was in a kennel, right? I raised one of my dogs in a kennel. Then they said, oh, the police made a mistake on the initial report. It's not a mistake. It's, closet, kennel, like those reports are not like, written. It's by a uniformed officer who arrived on the scene and he writes a report. The dog, maybe the kennel was in the closet. It was a big, probably walk-in closet. Maybe the kennel was in there. And so he just said closet. You don't know, but it's not a mistake. And it's not like, oh my God, they're bumbling the investigation. And the other thing was during the initial press conference, he said, the sheriff said something about like, there's no signs of foul play. And then everybody said, oh, they declared it no foul play. No, he just said there were no signs of foul play. And It's the initial press conference. They're hours into this thing. He probably hasn't even met with his detectives yet, so he's getting it by phone or by text, and they jump all over that stuff. Like, oh, they're bumbling or they made a mistake. They said it was no foul play. No, he said it didn't appear to be foul play. But we have such a thirst for this stuff, and there's such a community out there that jumps on this stuff that they misinterpret stuff that we all know it's just part of the business.
Well, Bobby, that's why sometimes, and not sometimes, all the time in a major case like this, high profile case like this, is that the messaging is so important. And if you notice, these guys on this case were the same guys that were on the Alec Baldwin shooting at the Rust.
I didn't know that.
Guys, yeah,
really.
And so at least
same talking heads, same people.
But they have some experience.
Oh, it's that county. It's the same because he's a county sheriff.
But I recognized the sheriff. He was the guy.
Oh, really?
Head. Yeah,
that's interesting.
So they have some experience with a hugely high-profile case,
right?
But, look, one of the things that you always have to say in the messaging is like, the information we are giving you is preliminary and subject
Right.
to change. That
Right.
is the most important sentence you could say.
Right.
Because if you don't say it, the press and the public can chew you up and spit you out.
That's why I always said, people have asked me that, and luckily I didn't work too many high-profile cases, a couple, but not too many high-profile cases where I was in charge of the investigation in my career. I work gangs and drugs. Nobody cares about that stuff. But my whole approach to, and I had one case that was crazy in Brooklyn where we actually took over an entire block, Schenectady and Sterling. We took over that entire block as we seized an entire house, and we had SWAT teams, NYPD and FBI SWAT teams, 300 cops and agents on that night out there in the neighborhood, and we took over the whole neighborhood. And the mayor had to be briefed, so I had to make like index cards for the mayor because the mayor was going to possibly be asked about this big takedown with helicopters and stuff. And but
who was the mayor at the time, Bobby? If you don't mind me asking, what was it, Giuliani or?
It was 1990, whoever. It was December. I remember it was December 6th, 1990.
That was Koch still, I think.
No, it would have been.
No?
Would have been the first black mayor. What was his name? His name is
Dinkins.
Dinkins. Might have been Dinkins.
The tennis guy, yeah, Dinkins, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's right because we had. I remember, but other than that, my philosophy was I didn't release any information from my investigation unless there was only two criteria, unless it provided the public some level of safety. That's the one. Like if there was a public safety function that me releasing this somehow made the public safer, that's one. The second one, if it served me a strategic avenue of my investigation to let the information out there, and then knowing some of my subjects would read it. We did this kind of when I worked the Lucchese family for a couple of years. We knew they read the Daily News, and we would, so maybe release some information from the investigation to the Daily News, and then wait and hear for a wiretap of them talking about the investigation. But that's
implicating themselves, maybe.
Yeah,
Bobby,
they got it wrong in the paper because this is really what happened.
Right.
Bobby, as a boss in the homicide squad, the sergeant had to write this report called the preliminary investigative worksheet. And what it was for, it was to brief the police commissioner, who would then use it. And after a while, they were giving it to the press.
And giving the report right to the press?
Well, DCPI would conveniently,
right.
And that's the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. So we use these acronyms. We think everyone knows what it means. But they would give it to the press. And I would see things that I wrote in this report in an article in the Daily News or the Post, exactly how I wrote it. I go, wow, I'm a journalist.
They should have given you credit for the quote.
Yeah.
But
the DCPI had some of their favorites too.
I thought it was ridiculous because the press had everything we had in our investigation. That's why, like you say, I wouldn't tell them everything. But then,
look, Jimmy Breslin hung out at the gin mills, right? He knew where to hang out. He knew who to talk to, who to buy drinks for.
Absolutely. So what we're looking at now, though, I think is, again, and some people are like, oh, you guys are covering too much on. I think it's important that we cover the police aspect on this. And of course, everyone is working or waiting for the toxicology, and that'll be the Bible of this case.
But people should realize that in addition to, they're not just sitting around waiting, right? They're analyzing, financial records of this family. They've talked to friends, families, neighbors, people who go to the restaurants where they frequent in the town. They're talking to everybody, and they're interviewing everybody about every part of these people's lives. They're looking at their financial records. They're looking at any business transactions they had. They are going through if they had cars that had a computer in it, to see when the last time they drove it. They're analyzing that. They're doing everything they can while they wait for, the results of the tox and the rest of the autopsy. But they're doing a lot of stuff now behind the scenes, and it's all really to kind of support or rule out these different kind of avenues of what possibly could have happened. Phil mentioned that she might have had an undiagnosed condition, and that reminded me of Gene Hackman's condition. Now, everybody knew he had a long-standing heart condition, but how did he find out about it? He was filming a movie in the 1980s, I think, early 80s, and he had an event on set, And he said, "No, I'm okay. I'll just go back to my trailer." And the set medic, I think, came and said, "No, you should go to the hospital." And the doctor said he was like 4 hours from dying. He had an undiagnosed heart condition. They did an angioplasty that day. That's how he had a blockage that he didn't know about until he started feeling lightheaded, right? And so the doctor said that blockage could have either completely cut off and no blood supply to the brain, or a piece of that block could have kind of lodged in the brain. You had a stroke. And so they did an angioplasty like right there in the hospital when he went to get seen. And so he had an undiagnosed, medical condition, heart condition, until they saw it. And so that's not uncommon, especially, she's in her 60s. She might still be considered, I'm in my 60s. I consider myself young. But she might have considered, she might have not had the checkups and the stuff because she felt fine and stuff.
Bobby, the pills that were found were blood pressure pills. So was she trying to get a blood pressure pill for Hackman after he had collapsed, or did she have diagnosed high blood pressure? And if she had undiagnosed high blood pressure, the autopsy, there are things that happen when you have high blood pressure and you're not on medications for it that they could see in your body. I think kidney damage, different things of that nature. So those are the things that are going to be very important for the autopsy. And like you said, they're going to be checking so many things. They're probably going to want to find out from her, whoever her medical doctor is, what type of ailments did she have? So those are all going to be very important factors to determining what happened with regard to her.
And they're doing all of that now while they're waiting for the rest of that stuff.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Hit that like button. Share us with your friends and your family. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And you can join the Police Off the Cuff family by becoming a contributor and a member of our Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. I think it's so important to, and Bobby, you opened some the eyes of some people here. So many of the questions are, why did they lock the dog in the closet? Well, I don't think they intended on dying. They didn't know they were going to die. And, unfortunately, the dog couldn't get out and the dog died.
We don't know why. Like I have neighbors here who have 3 dogs, and they're one of them works at the animal shelter. So basically 2 of those dogs are like problems that they were going to probably be euthanized or whatever. And so they brought them home as a foster, and we call it a foster fail. So now they have 3 dogs. One of the dogs doesn't get along with the other 2. It doesn't get along with one of the other 2. So they're constantly playing like which dog is in one room. And so they have a guest room that they keep the one dog in while the other dog's outside, and then they switch them, so you don't know if this dog had issues. If it felt safer. So one of my dogs was raised, he was kennel trained, and he, for a long time, we kept the kennel in the house, and he would go in there and sit down on his own. We didn't close it, but he would come and go. In the early days when he was a puppy, we would close it and stuff, because that was part of the training. But this dog may have had issues, maybe with one of the other animals, or maybe it was not feeling well, and they just put it in there. There's 1,000 reasons. As a dog owner, I can tell you, there's 1,000 reasons that dog might have been in that kennel.
Well,
and it's not
Bobby, one of your dogs was an Upper East Side dog, so he's a little snobby.
Bobby, it was also reported today that initially that dog that passed away was reported to be a German Shepherd. However, they said today it was misreported that it wasn't a Shepherd. It was some kind of a different name, a very unusual name of the breed of dog, but I believe it was to be a smaller dog. So perhaps just what you're saying might be the case. The other dogs were Shepherds. Maybe they put the smaller dog into the crate because the dogs might have been playing too rough or something of that nature. Yeah. But those are things that detectives, investigators will be able to determine from interviews of family members, friends, even employees that come and caretakers, things of that nature. So I'm sure to be able to figure out why that dog was in that crate in that area.
Absolutely. Because like I said, if they interviewed me and something happened to my neighbors, I would tell them, oh yeah, that one dog is always in the back bedroom because he doesn't get along with the other dog.
Sure.
That's one of those things. Absolutely, Phil. Like you said, I mean, they'll be able to determine that, and it's not difficult.
Unchained Melody, the guy that called the cops said the door was locked, and others said the door was left wide open, which is it. The door was open. That was in the warrant.
Right, but I know what he's talking about. He's talking about that there's a 911 call where you hear the guy say, the door's locked, I can't get in.
Right.
And what happened?
I think he didn't want to go in. That's what it sounded like.
Or I think it's different people. I think there was like one was the maintenance guy, and then they called like the security guy for the neighborhood. I guess this gated community has a security guard that either drives around or bikes around, whatever. And they called him, and I don't know which one is on that 911 call, but you had two different people. I think one may have discovered the open door, and one may have been told, go up to the house, there's bodies. And when he got up there, he went to a different door.
Right. Might be another door, Bobby.
Yeah, because this is a big sprawling house. It's got a lot of doors. And so the guy, whoever made that call, and I know what they're talking about, there is a guy on a 911 call that says, I can't get in, the door's locked, I'm looking through the window. And I just think that that's a different guy that made the call, because there was two maintenance guys that showed up. They're the ones that noticed the front door unlocked or unopened or whatever. And then they contacted the security guy, because I think they may have stepped in and may have seen a body and then got the hell out and called the security guy. Probably they retreated down to the bottom of the driveway to meet the guy. And then the guy went up himself and maybe went to a different door. And he's the one that made the 911 call.
I think one of the 911 calls that I heard, he said he could see through the window that there was a person laying on the ground. So, and then one of the other things is Hackman and his wife, they must have had a sense of security being in a gated community, secluded. They had no cameras. I mean, in 2025, a home with no cameras, there's got to be a reason for that. So the fact that the door being left open, and now you see that they don't have cameras, those two things kind of connect. You know, that they had a sense of security, that they didn't need cameras. And then during the day, the door is open, the maintenance guy's going to come in, or I'm going to go out to the yard, go to the garage, whatever. So I don't think that they were on a high alert of security, a high level of security. And that's probably what the reason for the door being open is.
But not even lock their doors at night. This is kind of neighborhood where they made it. They would live in there for 30 years and they're comfortable. They may not even lock their doors at night.
Right.
Sometimes I forget to lock my door at night. I never really worry about it, because these two shepherds I have, man, the first time anybody's around the house, they hear,
they're all over.
They just have to step on the walkway out front and they start barking. So they're my alarm system. And Hackman, I know, loved shepherds. So like you said, Phil, the other two dogs were shepherds. If they're good for one thing, they're good at guard dogs. And so they're the best. They're gonna make noise, and these guys always do for me. And so I think that they, I don't think the door is not a big issue.
No,
not a big deal,
Bobby. I just want to say also, some of these inconsistencies that we see in law enforcement, we get the answers to. Like you just described, there's two 911 calls. When you run the 911 calls, you say it was from two different phones, and that would tell you what happened. Same thing with the unlocked door, just inconsistencies. And in the warrant, clearly the detective said the front door was unlocked. But people that are following this investigation see that as, oh my God, this is so suspicious. And
I let's pull the curtain back a little bit on the police work that people may not know. I can almost guarantee you that they did a walkthrough with the two maintenance guys and said, when did you arrive? Where did you park? Where did you get out of the car? Where did you walk to? And then they did the same thing with the neighborhood security guy. When did you get here? Where did you go? What did you see? So they've got those stories. They've got the stories of everybody that was there before they arrived that day. And so they talked to them. They did a walkthrough with them. Show me where you went. Show me what you did. So the detectives have that covered. They know both stories. There's no inconsistency there that they know of, probably, because they've got the story. They interviewed both people. They've interviewed everybody that was on the property that day before they got there, and they know kind of what happened. And they probably already deconflicted those two 911 calls.
And another really important thing is that just as a regular homicide crime scene, I'm sure the whole scene was memorialized in photographs and in video.
I'm sure.
So that they have all of that, not just committed to their memory, but it's videotaped and they have it photographed. Guys, I want to thank Bobby Chacon, who coming on. He's one of the best talking heads on TV. And he even called, I used to do a little talking head. He said I was a barking dog,
I did not. No, I did not. I never did.
You bark sometimes, Billy. Don't worry. You bark.
But Bobby is low key. He's very knowledgeable. I love watching him when he is. And I feel so privileged when I call him with no notice whatsoever. And he said, yeah, I can do it. And I want to just thank you for that. And Phil Grimaldi, it speaks for himself, straight out of Brooklyn. Anyway, I'm going to give it one at a time. Let me go to Bobby first. Your final thoughts.
Well, I want to have one unrelated final thought, and that's, well, it's Gene Hackman in The French Connection. And I will tell you how much that movie meant to me. Like we said earlier, in the first episode that I ever wrote for TV was an episode of Criminal Minds. And in that episode, I recreated the scene from The French Connection, where Popeye Doyle goes into the bar and runs his hands under the bar and dumps all the stuff into the thing, and then goes into the bathroom with the undercover or the informant and says, "Where do you want it? The belly or the face? You know, the face shows more, but the belly hurts more, whatever." And I had Joe Mantegna watch that scene, because I wrote that scene and I played the bartender. And my partner, Jim Clemente, played a patron at the bar. And Joe watched that scene, and we recreated that in the first episode of television I ever wrote. And if you watch that episode, you will recognize that scene as homage. I paid homage to The French Connection, to Gene Hackman in that scene, because he gets his undercover into the bathroom, and the undercover's telling him what's really happening. And then he goes,
punches him.
I gotta give you a shot.
Where do you want it? He says.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the name of the hat that he's wearing? It has a certain name. Do you know what it's called?
The hat was very key to it, too.
It's called a pork pie hat. That's what it's called.
That's it. But what? Remember, they would throw it on the back window to know that they were doing surveillance, or to. What was that? You remember when they during the movie they would throw the hat on in the back window area. There would be like a ledge, and they would put the hat back there, and that meant that they were doing surveillance, I think. There was some importance to throwing a hat back there. But listen, that was one of my favorite movies, and like I said, it inspired me to become an NYPD detective, even though I never worked narcotics. And that's what he was. But it's just a true grit. And quickly I saw an interview of Gene Hackman on Johnny Carson, and McLean Stevenson had already appeared. And when he came on, McLean Stevenson said, "Gene, you're my favorite actor. You really become the person that you play in the part." And that's exactly what he did. He did it in many movies, but in The French Connection, it's exactly what he did. He almost quit the set the first day because he thought, he was probably a liberal guy or whatever. He thought the movie was a little bit too violent. And then Eddie Egan and Sonny Grasso took him out and brought him to some narcotics locations. And that bar scene that you were just talking about, he brought them to a bar in Harlem, and he saw that there was all the drugs, and he went back and he became Popeye Doyle, and it was just, what a great movie.
Because he realized probably this is real. Like, when he reads the script, he's like, this is too much, But now it's real, and he goes, "Yeah, it's real. I can do this."
Real. For years, there's a scene where he's following the French guy on the subway.
Yeah,
and he obviously is made, but he's trying to pretend he wasn't. He grabs a phone and he goes, "I don't care how many bartenders are out sick. I ain't working that joint." I used to say that all the time to my friends. Like The French Connection.
Or where they search the entire car and they're at wit's end and they can't believe it.
Yes, that's such a great scene.
Everything in this car but the rocker panels. The rocker? What are you talking about?
Come on, Irv. What are you kidding me? What the hell is that, Irv?
He's so.
That guy was a real NYPD mechanic. He worked.
Really?
Yes, he was a legit. There was a lot of real cops in there. And when they filmed the scene underneath the elevated train along 86th Street, what they did was they mounted cameras in the car, and they just took a red light, a bubble, they put it on the top of the car, and they just drove through, and they did it 4 or 5 times, and they actually had a real fender bender. The big accidents were staged and all,
right.
But that really happened. That was filmed in my neighborhood. The Marlboro Projects was just 2 blocks from my house. So yeah, it was really, really, really something. It really hit home, that movie. It was just very inspiring.
From the chat, Becky Brindle Scala, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Some dogs are crated at night or during times when they're overactive. Maybe to keep being safe from fall. Met Gene and Betsy in the 80s. So sweet. Very sad. Well, thank you.
Great point. That's a great point. I mean, dogs, and old people, they don't mix. My mom is 88. She lives with my sister in Florida. My sister's got 3 bulldogs, the big fat low to the ground ones, and they're clumsy and stuff. And so they got to keep the dogs away from my mom, because my mom uses a walker, and she could trip over those dogs. Those dogs are not the brightest, and they're small, but they're big lugs. They're like small boulders rolling around my sister's house. And so that's a great point, that you may keep the dog crated because Gene's walking, he's 95, he walks with a cane, and a dog.
You don't want him tripping and falling.
Yeah.
No, that's more dangerous. Anyway, guys, I want to thank both of you for coming on the show tonight. Some people said we did too much coverage on this, but
Bill, I got to comment on that, please, real quick. There's a lot of conspiracy stories going around about this case, and we've been reporting. Bill, I didn't do any of the previous shows, but some of the shows were answering questions that had come up, and I think it's actually a service that you have three people that are in law enforcement, and we're kind of dispelling some of the conspiracy and the rumors and pointing out things and that make the most sense. And this is what detectives and investigators do. So.
And Phil, I got to play a snippet from Bobby Chacon on News Nation too. So he's calling me up and say, "Hey, put me on your show."
At the end of the day,
shows, right? Yeah,
you fucking dog, put me on your show.
At the end of the day, the people in the chat that are saying, "Oh, you just report," we're not reporting the same stuff. There was a couple of new things, but we're giving answers to some of the stuff that's already been out there for days. And I think that average Joe is not going to get it. That's why we're explaining it. When that word mummification came into this case, that really threw everybody into conspiracy mode, and it was very simply explained last night by Barbara Butcher.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And did in the Northeast, did we see a lot of mummification cases? Probably not, because of the humidity and the atmosphere that's here in the Northeast. But in New Mexico, extremely dry. That's how that came about. But Gene Hackman being such a great actor, 77 movies to his credit, many Academy Awards. It was just, it would have been a big story, like I said, if he had died at home in bed. And I think that everybody has to just, take a deep breath and let's see what the autopsy reveals, the toxicology, and we'll have some answers.
100%. And again, thank you guys so much, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now you can go watch Trump if you want, but I hope you watched us anyway. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
One episode just ain't enough.